North Carolina City and County Communicators, or NC3C for short, is heading to the Emerald City, Greenville, North Carolina, for the 2022 Annual Conference. The annual conference gives municipal and county communicators the opportunity to learn from industry professionals about topics that will help your everyday work life. Network with peers and gain support and ideas to assist you with your programs, and return to home base with tangible ideas that will jumpstart creativity. We'll be handing out the Excellence in Communications Awards, another chance to steal ideas and make them fit in your community. Annual membership is $50, and members who register before the early bird deadline of April 13th can attend April 27th through the 29th for $250. Memberships are also available for communicators within organizations like school districts, libraries, utilities, and public authorities. We hope to see you in Greenville for the 2022 Annual Conference. Visit nc3c.com for more information.
All right. Hey y'all, coming to you from Jacksonville, Florida, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government brought to you by engaging local government leaders. I'm Ben Kittelson, Senior Consultant at Tellus and GovLove co-host. And we have a great episode for you today. We are going to be talking all about Longmont. But first, the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. ELGL is a professional association engaging the brightest minds in local government. And mark your calendars, ELGL's annual conference is scheduled for this fall, October 13th and 14th. In Phoenix, Arizona. You can learn more about the conference and other upcoming events by going to elgl.org/events. Now, let me introduce today's guests. Sandi Seader is the Assistant City Manager of the City of Longmont, Colorado, and has been with the city since 1998. And she's been in her current role since 2012. Prior to becoming the Assistant City Manager, she served as the Assistant to the City Manager and as a Public Works Management Analyst. In 2020, she was named the Assistant of the Year by the Colorado City County Managers Association. And our second guest is Becky Doyle. She is the Executive Director of Consolidated Services for the City of Longmont, a position she's been in since November 2021. And prior to taking on her current role, she served as Assistant Director of Business Services and as a rate analyst for the city. Before joining the city, she worked in financial analysis and pricing in the software industry. So with that, Sandi, Becky, welcome to GovLove. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So we were talking before we recorded that you guys are listeners, so you know what's coming next. We always get started with a lightning round, so I'll make Becky go first. What was the first concert that you went to?
I think that it was Roger Waters, which was a funny thing for a 16-year-old to go to in the 90s, but that was it.
Wow, okay.
That's a good one. If you're going to start with one, start with a heavy one.
That's right.
And Sandi, what about you? What was your first concert?
Mine was the Monkees reunion tour. So, yes, also strange for a 13-year-old at the time.
Wow.
I love it.
But it's great.
I used to love the Monkees show reruns when I was a kid.
Same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, man. All right, so Sandi, we'll make you go first on this next one. What's your most controversial non-political opinion?
I think daylight savings time sucks. There's my opinion.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's controversial, though.
It may not be anymore. It used to be really controversial, but I don't think it is anymore.
Just the switch, or you don't like the late sunsets? You like?
I just don't like the switching.
You like
it
it being dark at 4? Or?
Don't switch it up on me. Yeah, don't switch it up on me. I'm good.
That's fair. All right, Becky, what about you? What's your most controversial non-political opinion?
Oh, I think that the key to successful marriages or partnerships is separate duvets.
I love that.
Separate duvets?
Separate duvets. Eliminating covers-related conflicts. Yes.
What do you do about the sheets?
You don't use sheets with duvets. Okay. We're very European,
Okay. That is, I don't know if that's controversial. It's innovative, I think, is what
We're all about innovation, yes.
All right. I gotta comport myself. Okay, Sandi, we'll make you go first on this next one. What book are you reading?
I am reading, just started, The Deeply Human Workplace by Sylvester. Sal is a colleague of ours here at the city and does a lot of training. He's an organizational development guru. And he has spent the last couple of years trying to figure out how do we create workspaces, whether they be virtual or not, remote or not, that really value employees as full humans. And so he has just put out his book. You can get it on Amazon. And so far it's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you have a colleague that both wrote a book and it's work related. This is, I mean, we're going to have to put this on the GovLive list, I think.
Yes. Awesome. Yes, that would be great. And he has a whole podcast series as well about the future of work, which is great. So
wow. Okay.
I encourage you to listen to it for sure.
What's the name of his podcast?
It's The Future of Work.
The Future of Work. Okay.
He did 2 years of interviews with top executives all around the world to try to figure out what's it going to look like next? What's the new normal, so to speak?
Huh, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, Becky, what about you? What book are you currently reading?
So many books, and apparently I just download them to my Kindle and have no idea what's going on. But I just started reading A Gathering of Shadows by Victoria Schwab.
Awesome. Cool. Is that I assume, is that like a science fiction fantasy?
Yes.
Cool.
Magic oriented.
Nice. All right. So my last lightning question for you guys, and Becky, will make you go first. Where do you go for inspiration?
I like to go outside. We're very fortunate to live, a little less than an hour from Rocky Mountain National Park, and that is, I think, an extremely inspirational place.
Yeah. Awesome. And Sandi, what about you?
Yes, I agree with Becky. Outdoors in Colorado is the place to be for sure. So I like to piddle around our local Lake McIntosh, whether that be in a kayak or just walking around or whatever that looks like. My favorite is with my kiddo because it just reminds me what I'm in this work for, is to make his community a better place. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Outdoors, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in Colorado, that hard to compete with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then one of my favorite things to ask folks is kind of their path into local government, because I think for people starting in local government, it can be a little daunting and you wonder how folks got to where they are. So, Sandi, why don't you go first on this one? What was your path into local government and how did you end up in Longmont?
Thanks. I appreciate that question. I tell people I started working for parks when I was 14 years old. I think a lot of times kids in high school and then, really kind of enter local government without even knowing it. They become lifeguards and they become park staff and they help with classes and day camps, and that's local government. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road. So I started doing that, mowing lawns at parks and teaching swim lessons, and then, worked for the local library, worked for the local day camp. And then when I went to school, I found out, hey, you could do this all the time. It's the best ever. So I got my master's degree in urban management and had done a few different internships in different parts of the country before I came to Colorado because, it's Colorado. So came to Longmont, and I've been very lucky in my career that I've been able to have new opportunities every few years. So I started in public works. And then moved to the city manager's office and have really been able to take on some new significant challenge every couple of years. So it's been great. It's a great place to have pretty much had most of my career here in Longmont.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I definitely resemble that remark. It's no longer on my resume, but my first real local government job was like doing food service for the zoo in the Portland area. So you start that but you don't even know.
Yeah, you don't even know that that's a thing yet.
All right, and Becky, what about you? What was your path to local government and to the city of Longmont?
It was not as direct, so I can be an example of the other thing, which is, so as you mentioned, I started my career in the software industry doing accounting and pricing and financial analysis, and was really looking to change my career in a way that could help make a difference for the community, and was fortunate to find a rate analyst role come up with Longmont, which was right in my backyard, and am now starting in my 10th year of using my financial analysis and management skills to help all the people around me.
Very cool. So were you doing like water and sewer rates?
Yes. Yeah. That's what I started out doing. Yes.
All right. That's very cool. That is a very nerdy way to get into it.
Everyone needs spreadsheets.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Was there, for both of you, and either of you can kind of go first, but was there something kind of early in your career that you're like, I'm going to stick with this, or early in your time in local government where I want to stick with this. This is why I like doing this work, and I'm going to stay in this field.
That's a good question. I think for me, when I worked on my first strategic planning effort, I think that was kind of the moment of, oh my gosh, we're going to create the future for this entire community. And we're going to do it together, and we're going to be instrumental in what that looks like. And we're going to do it with the community side by side, as opposed to, kind of a top-down sort of mentality. And, I was in love right there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Plus, day camp was pretty cool also.
Yeah.
I'd do that any day.
That is great. Yeah, and I think I had probably a similar experience, going through a water rate study. How inspirational. No, yeah. But looking at a long-term financial plan and saying like, wow, we really can deliver all of these capital projects and continue delivering clean, safe water to the community. And that's something that I can help do in a long-term capacity.
Yeah, it's thinking taking that long range look and thinking kind of bigger about like the community and the organization. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we've touched on it a little bit, but can either one of you guys tell us, our listeners, a little bit about Longmont for folks that maybe haven't been to your city?
Well, first of all, everyone should come to Longmont at some point.
Yeah. It's on the list. Yeah.
Yes. Good. We are about 38 miles north of Denver, but we are a standalone community. We're not a suburb. We have an open space ring that surrounds Longmont, very intentional by our city council. We're almost 100,000 people, just almost right there, according to the last census. We're just super close to 100,000 people, but we're not quite there. Started off as a farming community. The Chicago, Colorado colony is part of our history, and then turned into high tech with IBM joining the scene and lots of food service and things. We had a turkey plant for a long time, and now we're the home of Smuckers and all those wonderful Uncrustables that you can get. Those are made, a lot of them are made here in Longmont. We have won a ton of awards. The latest award we just won, we won 2 awards. One was for the best place to work from home. Top 10, right, Becky? Top 10 for best place to work from home. And then the other one is top places to have a fresh start was the other one that we
nice.
in the last month. I'm not sure about why the fresh start part, but certainly the work from home part is partially because we're one of the first communities to have our own municipal broadband next
cool.
light. So that's one of the things that makes not only just the views and the weather and the restaurants and the breweries, but also that lightning fast internet also doesn't hurt us in any way. Becky, awesome. What am I missing?
I think that covered it. That was a good overview.
So if you're looking to work from home or start over, Longmont should be at the top of your list.
That's right.
Yep.
That's awesome. So one of the reasons we got connected and wanted to have you guys on was to talk about Longmont CAReS. So I'll just start broad. Like what is Longmont CAReS? Like how did that kind of program come about?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So a few years ago, we looked around and realized that we had a number of assistance programs for low-income households that were happening in a disconnected way in all kinds of different departments. And one of the reasons that we were looking and noticed this is that our city council had been considering a measure to exempt groceries from sales tax. And we're not a very big community. And exempting all groceries from sales tax would have had a pretty large impact on our budget, although we know that's something that a lot of communities have done around us. So we started looking at alternatives, and one thing that we talked about was, what if we rebate sales tax associated with grocery purchases to low-income households? Our city council thought that that was a great idea and a good way to go forward. So we looked around and thought about how we could combine that effort with some existing assistance programs, and noticed that there were, how many, maybe five or six like different programs with different applications and different ways that, people had to apply for and then receive that assistance. And that didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we brought together a citywide team from, folks in all of the areas that were providing that assistance or referring people to different services, and tried to make a single point of entry so that people could go through one simplified application and get the help that they needed. So Longmont CAReS today includes rebates of that grocery-related sales tax, the city portion of property tax, or a portion of rent for those who are renting their homes, a partial rebate of water rates and of electric rates, and of a fee that we have on our utility bills for park and greenway maintenance. So, and I think that those were the things that we started with, and then we've been able to continue to expand the program. So this year we've added also the waste management fee as a rebatable fee and a part of our storm drainage rate. So we continue to improve the program and make the benefit better every year. Sandi, would you add anything?
I certainly appreciate that, Becky, because it was a collaborative effort to try to bring everybody together. And now we're able to refer. We now have a list of people that we can refer to other assistance as we find it. So during COVID, we had a token program where people could go and visit a local restaurant, and we would pay for your dinner. So we were able to offer that first to the folks who were participating in the CARES program, because we knew who they were. We knew they already qualified. We were able to send them additional opportunities, because we had their data.
Yeah. Very cool. So essentially you have all these people that might be applying to programs, assistance programs separately, are now coming through one door. And how does the kind of qualification piece work? Do they have to hit a certain income threshold and then they get all of this stuff, or is it kind of phased based on what their level of income is?
It is all or nothing, essentially, and we cross qualify with other programs. So the federal LEAP program was our first program that we cross qualified with, and so really it's any means tested program that's at that level or below in terms of income. So in that way, we're not directly doing income qualification. We're just, accepting proof of qualification for other programs. So LEAP or SNAP or WIC or free lunch, anything on that list, we would accept as proof of eligibility.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're already qualified for SNAP. You get all of this as well. Okay. That's awesome.
A pretty simple one-page application.
Yeah, I think I saw it on your website, and we'll link to the program in our kind of show notes so folks can find it. But yeah, it looked very, very easy to navigate.
We hope so. That's the goal. Make it easy.
Well, and you already kind of mentioned one of the benefits of doing like a single application for something like this is that you can then reach back out to those folks when you have a new program that might be a way. Are there other examples of ways that you've engaged with this group or used that data to kind of, do something else with it?
Yeah. One opportunity that came up was through our water conservation program. We partner with other organizations, and one group wanted to offer a garden in a box, like a low water planting group at no cost or reduced cost. either reduced or no cost to Longmont CAReS participants. That was really great. We also are able to refer people into our free or heavily subsidized internet program, which is administered separately because of federal funding, but that's been very successful as well.
Very cool. And how many folks have participated or applied through kind of Longmont CAReS?
Well, over the years. So one thing that we noticed when we first designed the program and put it out was that we knew from the LEAP participation numbers in our county that there were probably about 1,800 households that qualified based on their participation in LEAP. Mm-hmm. But the first year that we ran the program, we only got about 125 applicants. So through our participation in the What Works Cities program, we were able to work with the Behavioral Insights team to run a trial to improve outreach. And so we ran a randomized controlled trial in 2020 and saw a much higher rate of application during that trial and had 711 participants in 2020. Which was really great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I do 711 people or 711 participants. Do they all participate in all of the kind of offerings, or I guess I'm curious of kind of the impact. Is that, they're getting kind of everything that y'all offer, or are they only participating in some of that, or?
They're getting certainly the rebate component of it, and then they have access to referrals to other programs such as we have some programs through our housing group that they may qualify for, or like the internet offers. So that's good. The average rebate that they might receive on their utility bill, I think, is about $350, $375.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impactful for households. They've been very, very excited to have that credit show up on a utility bill.
For sure. Well, and we're going to ask you more about What Works Cities, but before we move on, what if a city's is hearing about Longmont CAReS and they're like, man, I think our community could use something like that. What advice would you give another organization that was trying to start a similar kind of assistance program or application process?
I would say collaborate quickly, and make it easy. Make it easy for people to be able to participate in the program, because there are so many barriers to entry already for people, particularly those who are low income, who are often trying to reach. There's so many barriers to just completing any kind of application that's long or involved. So the easier that you can make it for that person, the better off you'll be. Have those lean principles and those equity lenses in mind from the beginning.
Yeah. Absolutely. The other piece of advice that I would give is to ask the people that you're trying to reach what would be of use to them, because something incredibly useful that we did, was go out and engage the populations that we were trying to reach. And it ended up changing the way that we thought the program was going to work. We thought, it's obviously we're in the government, we know best, right? But we thought that the most useful thing would be to have a monthly discount on the utility bill, like to kind of take an amount off each month. And through our public engagement process, people told us that they would rather see, a lump sum credit for the whole year, and that would really help them, manage like larger purchases or unexpected expenses.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting, and we wouldn't have, made that choice absent asking people what would help them the most.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, because then they have more control over how they spend their own money that way. Yeah. Huh. Very cool. Awesome. So like I said, we'll link to Longmont CAReS, and if folks are listening and want to learn more, that you guys have lots of information on your website. So you mentioned What Works Cities, and I heard through a little birdie that you guys have been awarded a What Works City certification. And as folks are listening to this, the announcement has been out. And so congrats, way to go. That's awesome. So I'm curious first at like a high level, like what all goes into that? Like how did you guys decide to do this? And what was kind of the work behind applying for and earning a certification?
I'll start there.
Yeah.
So we found ourselves a couple of years ago noticing that we had a lot of data in places throughout the city, in all of our different departments, and maybe not a lot of ways that or opportunities for sharing that information with each other. So I think that was the genesis of looking for a different way to think about our organizational data. And so we had started the conversation, and our data governance team is called Slaying the Data Dragon. And I have to, yeah, we can talk more about that. Yeah, thank you. That's Sandi named it. And it's incredible because like it really does evoke the level of coordination and effort that's required to bring something together like that. So we convened this group and had started to talk about what the issues were, and then came across the What Works Cities program as a set of best practices, which was exactly what we needed. With great, how is everyone else doing this? And so went through our first
an iteration of
there we go. Yeah.
We went through and tried to answer their questions one day, and realized that when we pulled up that their checklist and their information and the things that they bring as best practices, we knew about all of them, and we're like, yeah, those are great things to do, and had done almost none of them in practice. Yeah.
Are there examples of those where you're like, hey, we, it was pie in the sky on a list somewhere that we'd like to do, but we just haven't gotten to it?
I think one thing for me, and then Becky, feel free to jump in. There's so many different criteria that they look at, but one of them is that elected official support, understanding and support. Really wanting to make good decisions based on data. And our elected officials had mentioned it, had talked about it, but we weren't really able to kind of put it all together until we realized that that's a hugely important part of any data program, is that your leadership, your elected officials, your city managers, your directors understand the need, are willing to use the data to make those decisions, and then follow through on that. And so that was a big one, at least for me in my role. To really help with, and to help with our elected officials and directors and such, to make sure they understood what we're doing and why why it's important, why it's so important. So that's my perspective. But Becky was our fearless leader through most of this process, and so I'd put her.
Yeah, I think that was a really big one. Is we'd heard from our city manager and our city council that they wanted this data, and really connecting, having the data and the information to making the decision based on that data and information. That's, I think, a work in progress is communicating how that data is used in that process.
Yeah, it's one thing to have it; it's another to make a decision informed by it, rather than maybe what they wanted to do beforehand.
Exactly. The other thing that was really big, I think, is there's a whole practice related to repurposing, to stopping doing something that maybe is no longer necessary or not the most effective approach, and then using those resources in a different way. And I think that's something that we aspire to do, but in government, it's very difficult to stop doing anything. So I would flag that as an aspiration.
Yeah. No, that's fair. No, that's definitely the case in organizations I've worked in, where you just keep adding on to it rather than stopping doing anything. Cool. Well, are there other examples of like new things that you guys started doing because of that, or ways that you kind of changed how you do work as part of the certification process?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we did and we worked on was a data inventory. We had a lot of disconnected practices, in community services, in the utilities, where people had a lot of information, but we didn't know the information that the other groups had.
Yeah.
And so starting to bring that together, and I mean, all it is a list, right? Of like, here are our data sources, here are the data sets that we have. And that is really allowing us to reduce the duplication in collecting information in more than one way from more than one group, and to start to think about what standards might be for the way that we want to ask questions or the way that we want to maintain information across departments. So I would say that was probably the biggest thing and the biggest change.
Well, and how did you go about like doing that? Because it's one thing to say that, identify that as an issue. It's another to like actually break down those silos. So what is that, like giving that responsibility to a group? Is it a person that's now in charge of it? Is it starting in something new that takes the place of kind of a bunch of silos? Or how did that like practically work?
Well, a couple of things, I think. So through our engagement with What Works Cities, we had a technical assistance engagement with GovX, the Center for Government Excellence at Johns Hopkins University. And in that process, we brought together a project team that was cross-departmental, and we're working on the issue of, during COVID, that people were having trouble paying utility bills, and how could we kind of approach that problem from a systematic citywide lens to really see what we knew about the situation and how best to support people. And so having people involved in that process and share the information that they had that was relevant to that really opened the door. So in solving one very specific problem, we were able to have a lot of conversations about how we could solve similar problems moving forward.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So can you walk us through that process a little bit? Like what did you find, solving that one problem where you learned your lesson and like, this is what we need to change going forward?
Yeah. Well, we learned several lessons in there.
And Sandi, everything, like,
right? Yes, and Sandi, jump in also. But one of the things that we learned was that we had assistance going to some households and we hadn't really done sort of that ground truthing of what would be important to people. And in some cases, we hadn't communicated about what resources were available. So we had, money that was not distributed to people who needed it. And really sharing all the information around the issue helped us make sure that we were making the best use of all of our resources. Sandi, would you?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Becky. And I think that, I think organizations, especially when they're large organizations, can go off and do their own things in so many different ways. And so to be able to recognize together as a group that, hey, we could do better than this and to get together in that spirit of we're here to help people. That's the whole point. And so how do we do that together in a way that is sustainable for us too? We were able to clean up our own processes as well and make it easier for us at the same time as we made it easier for our residents to be able to apply.
Right. And then on an ongoing basis, we identified a team that could kind of go out and talk to people in the various departments and say, what information are you using on a daily basis to run your operation, and how can we reflect that in the data inventory? And that's definitely an ongoing effort. And, every time we talk about a problem, we try to identify data sets that we can include in the data inventory. And we are in the process of hiring our first dedicated staff member who has that as part of their job description. So we are pulling together a team and moving from a small but mighty group of volunteers to people who really are focused on helping us take an organizational approach to our data.
I would also add, Becky, that the governance team is a huge piece to this too, that we added as part of the What Works Cities work, would you say?
Yes.
Because it felt to me like we did have lots of data all over the place, and there weren't very many standards in how we use the data or what we're looking towards, and to just to have a governance team that's going to help to work through what does that mean and how do we use things, and the fact that we're just dedicated to using data to make decisions, even though it feels like a very base step, was important to pull that team together. It's the city manager is part of that as well, and so his support in that is so important because he's the one usually asking the tough questions that we need to pull some data together, to be able to answer. And so to get the perspective of what are the decisions we're trying to inform, along with the people who have the data that could do that information, was powerful, I think, in that governance team. And I'm not sure we would have done that without the guidance and support of What Works Cities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had created the group that we were calling Slaying the Data Dragon, but yeah, with the assistance, of our partners with GovX, we actually created a data governance plan that formalized the role of that group and the executive committee that really does the decision making around the policies that we implement. So that was a huge step.
And I think culturally too, Becky, I feel like, you and the whole data team, the whole Dragon Slayer team have really changed the conversation in our organization about data. It's important. It's a resource. It's an asset. It's not just another to-do. It needs to be thoughtful. We need to be collecting data in a way that makes sense and not collecting data just for data's sake. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that culture change is also happening because of that group and the conversations that we've had through this certification process.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not there by any means because there's always more to do, but I feel like that culture change has shifted significantly, certainly since we started this journey.
Absolutely. We've also been really fortunate that, our focus and our work around data has been happening at the same time as a renewed and reinvigorated focus on equity. And those conversations have really informed each other, so that we've been able to talk about how we can make sure that we're using centering equity in our data work, and how we can use data as well in our equity work. Did I just say that the same thing 2 times? I don't know.
Yeah, you nailed it.
All right, good. Yeah. But and that's been such an important partnership between the data governance team and the equity team, to understand that we have to have both of those tool sets in order to reach organizational goals.
It's a great point, Becky. Ben, you had asked if you had any advice for people who might be wanting to start a CARES program. The only thing that I would add is we should have added one demographic question, because what we find is that with respect to equity, race often determines outcome for people. And so the one thing I would have done differently on our application is included a question about race as we were getting applications, so that we could see whether we were making a difference that way.
Well, and that's fascinating, the incorporation of equity, because often, when I talk to folks that work in the DEI field in local government, they talk about a need for data to know, what kind of things they should be doing or what kind of areas to improve on. So is that kind of where you guys are at, where it's identifying the data that folks need, or what is that equity and data conversation?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly the conversation that we're having is, what information do we need in order to know that we're making progress on our equity goals? And something that we've talked about is, sometimes that requires asking questions that may be sensitive, about race and about income and things, so that we know what's happening within our community, and that requires a lot of sensitivity around how the data is handled, making sure that privacy is paramount, but also, when done well, we think can have tremendous benefits. So we've been really, really excited that all has come together, and that, that's been able to inform also the way that we create policies around data, is making sure that we are collecting the information that we need in order to tell people about our successes.
Yeah.
And the example that Becky gave around making sure that before we designed the CARES program, that we were asking people who would be the recipients of CARES funding. That's one of the things that's on the Government Alliance for Race Equity's checklist around how do you, when you're designing a program, do you ensure equity? And one of those, number one is, have you consulted with the people you're trying to help? So that's another example where we try to bring in some equity tools as we're designing programs. And then again, as we're looking at the data afterwards.
Awesome. Very cool. So before we move off from the Well-Work Cities certification, slaying the data dragon, I think we haven't highlighted enough how awesome that name is. But Sandi, how did you come up with that? It's great. Like, do you guys have T-shirts that I can buy?
We should totally do T-shirts.
How have we not done T-shirts?
That's a great idea. I think so. When Becky and I first started bringing folks together, she and I would have conversations around, well, what are all the data sets that we have? What are questions that people have? How come we can't pull these things together easily so that people can see what data we have and how they can answer their questions? You see dashboards and fancy things in other communities. And so then we started talking with people about it. And it was meeting after meeting after meeting of, wait, what data do you have? And how are you using it? And how can we pull it together? And what do we actually want to know in the first place anyway? And so it just felt like a huge, overwhelming kind of, oh my gosh, what one question, it was kind of turned into a wicked problem. Like one question always begat another question, which begat another, as opposed to kind of solutions and how do we work through it. And so that's when we decided to bring together some folks to start talking about it. How do we pull our data together to answer questions for decision makers more quickly and less ad hoc than we have been? And that's when Becky found the What Works Cities resource, and I had called our first couple of meetings to say, hey, we've got to do something about this. Our data is going to become this huge dragon that's going to eat us all because we just keep collecting data and we're not using it the way that we need to be using it. And so that's where the name came from, is I pulled together a group of folks and I said, I feel like this is a dragon we need to slay together to make it really work for us. And so and the name stuck. They call themselves the Dragon Slayers. I love it. Yes.
And we call the executive committee the Round Table as well.
Yes, yes. That's right.
Keeping with the theme.
A little nod to the theme, yeah.
Oh my God, that's great. That's amazing. Well, it's an excellent metaphor to get at, like how complicated it is once you start kind of peeling back the onion or pulling at the string, right? And how do you feel you guys have you guys done a good job of, councils making decisions with data now, or you've implemented ways that, the data is getting used? It's not just being collected. It's, or how do you feel you are in that kind of life cycle or process, I guess?
We're getting there.
Yeah. We're getting there.
Yeah.
I don't think we're to that point. I mean, I think we're currently working on a project that Becky is leading to try to help us to pull the critical data together to make that, that dashboard, that kind of data warehouse type of thing. And that will be a huge accomplishment once we get to that point. But in the meantime, I do think that we are gathering data for council. They are asking for that kind of data. And I think that it's more top of mind for people. I mean, rather than just, I know I need to solve a problem, but I can't tell you how big the problem is or, anything really about it. It's much more, I think, normal for us to have conversations saying, well, how big is the problem? Let's find that out first before we start to, work on, what do we need to know before we can make a decision on this?
Yeah. The conversations we're having are different, and we're focusing a little more on, what's the goal? Like, what's the outcome that we're trying to get to, and how will we know when we get there? And that's been really impactful.
That's awesome. Well, and I know, part of the What Works City certification is also identifying areas that you have still room for improvement on. So are there things that, through this process, you're like, this is what we're going to try and do next year or in the next couple of years as part of before the next time we apply for a certification? Are there any of those areas?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few. I think the data warehouse project that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. I think being able to provide some more regular data to City Council. There's still several reports coming out as opposed to something that's more centralized for them.
Yeah.
They're asking us questions that we haven't been able to answer quite yet. So when we had new positions that we requested in the budget, one of the council members said, "What's the outcome? If you get that position, then what are your goals and how are you going to measure success?" And I thought, yes, dang, now I got to answer that question. With the data that we have. So I know we have a little ways to go there. The other thing that I would love to invite Becky to talk more about is, really integrating GIS a lot more, GIS data a lot more with what we're doing. And she is, as she mentioned, standing up our first data analytics division. And that's super exciting because I know there's a lot of areas that we could use some extra attention. And so to be able to bring in some experts with some resources is going to be tremendous in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We're also really excited about the evaluation work that we did some evaluation, as part of our technical assistance engagement with the behavioral insights team, and continuing to flex that muscle and continue to have that conversation about how do you know that it's working and that it's doing the thing that you wanted it to do, and that's an ongoing conversation. So we're excited to have a little more capacity to support that work.
Cool. That's super exciting stuff. Awesome. Well, I know we talked to, obviously a lot about data and kind of the work that you guys are doing to both as part of the What Works Cities and to incorporate data into decision making. I'm curious, Sandi, about community involvement and engagement. How does this kind of fit into that picture? Or, are you guys incorporating engagement of the community into kind of some of these, into this process, or what are you guys doing, I guess, in that area?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, community involvement has taken on a whole new look post, pandemic and post-pandemic. We have been champions of community involvement for years and years. We've had a community involvement team that has worked through with the IAP2, the International Association of Public Participation. We've been members of that group for a long time. We have about 50 trained facilitators who can do some level of facilitation with the community, because our promise to the community is that we will involve them in our decision making when it is appropriate. So, for example, we're probably not going to survey you on the best way for us to install water lines, for example. Yeah. We'll probably not do that. But we will consult you about timing, about notifications, about, different things that look like that. If the council is going to take a look at some sort of a new law or something, we have just had a big conversation with a neighborhood around parking in their neighborhood. And so it's important to know that here's where the expertise goes, and then here is the consultation with the community to ensure that we understand their perspectives. And so in understanding those perspectives, it's important to include equity, to make sure that the people that are at the table are the people who are impacted by changes. And then on top of that, to be able to have data around who was part of that conversation. Did we catch the right people? The data information is so important in that stakeholder engagement and really analyzing whether we've gotten the right people there. And so community involvement, in my mind, is kind of where equity and data are able to meet in the community to be able to really involve them in the decisions that affect them the most.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Then, not to shift gears too hard, but as I was kind of reading about Longmont and in preparation for this interview, I read that you guys had sent some assistance to your neighboring city of Louisville. So I guess, can you talk about kind of they were dealing with a disaster recovery from a fire? So can we start maybe with the assistance you gave? And then I know you guys have as a city, have a little bit of familiarness with disaster recovery from a flood. So I don't know the best way into this, but I'm curious about kind of that, both that assistance and then kind of the history and kind of the, for lack of a better word, expertise that maybe your staff have from kind of prior disaster recovery.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, we did have a pretty disastrous flood in 2013. The first estimates were $152 million of damage to the public infrastructure. That's the public infrastructure, not even the private infrastructure. And so having to navigate federal assistance and the work with FEMA, we're so grateful for our partners at FEMA who were able to help us to rebuild our infrastructure. But there's lots of rules, and people want to make sure that money is being used appropriately. And so there's plenty of things that you can do right off the bat to kind of screw up your accounting and finances when you have a disaster, because everyone's just doing what they need to do to get through it. And that's the right answer. You have to do the right thing, first. And there's also some ways that you can support the process if you understand sort of what FEMA's looking for, what the state's looking for, how grants work in the first place, all those different kinds of things. And so, unfortunately, we had that disaster, but fortunately, we had built some real tight systems on how to do disaster recovery in order to hopefully maximize and leverage those grant dollars as much as we possibly could. And so, and actually had formalized the voters in a bond, not in a bond issue, in a sales tax increase a few years ago, actually increased resources for our public safety department. And part of that was for a recovery officer who was somebody full-time, because we recognize that it's not so much if there's going to be a disaster, but when. And so making that a full-time position, I think, was really helpful and something that the voters found to be certainly important after our flood. We were able to then, the person who was in that role, as soon as he saw what was happening in Louisville, he jumped in and volunteered as an individual person just to say, I want to help and I have the expertise and I can do that. And that led to a great conversation. We had certainly offered help to Louisville, but it didn't really hit home until they saw, this is what you're talking about. Organization of disaster recovery, which nobody thinks about that way. I think people think you're just going to recover. Yeah. But there's a lot of process to that. There's a lot of systems that you can set up that will help you in the end. And so when he jumped in and volunteered, that opened that conversation between their city manager and our city manager. And what we offered was everything and anything we've got expertise in. So we have a very open-ended intergovernmental agreement with Louisville for pretty much anything they need. So if they need financial assistance to understand how the accounting rules go, or they need purchasing to make sure that they're following the federal purchasing rules, or they need housing because housing is where they were hit the worst from the fires, or the overall disaster recovery. So our recovery officer has been working in Louisville and probably will for at least another month or so. Is sort of when our next check-in is, just to help them get organized and to know what they need to ask, really.
Yeah.
Because it's confusing. When a disaster hits, it's confusing. It's stressful. There are so many people that, they've been working their tails off for days and days and days on end. And so to have somebody be able to come in and help put some order to that chaos is something that, unfortunately, we have that experience in.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it's the last thing on someone's mind is, the accounting and the record keeping. It's, when you're in the midst of it, you're trying to, put out the fire, deal with the flood. So is it setting up systems and structures to make this as just part of normal business, or kind of or is it just, like you said, knowing the right questions to ask? I'm curious kind of what changes happen to make an organization better at those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is knowing which questions to ask, but also how to set up those systems. So I know that when we had our flood, we kind of said, here's one account number you should put all your time to. No, that's, as it turns out, that makes it very difficult down the road. If you can, do some more detailed documentation at the beginning about what happened and when, just that simple, tell me a story of what happened today, that makes a huge difference in what recovery looks like longer term.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, and I'll link to kind of the story of I can't remember if it was a news story or something from the two cities' websites about kind of that work that you guys are doing for Louisville. So, because I thought that was really cool. So,
our hearts go out to the residents, of Superior and Louisville and Broomfield, and certainly any way that we can support, we want to be there.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap up our conversation, what's kind of next for y'all? What are you guys, and Becky, maybe we can make you go first since, but what should our listeners look out for that you guys are working on that you might share in the next few months?
Yeah. A project that we're really excited about and kind of brings in a lot of the things that we've been talking about here in the last few questions is that we've undertaken a climate risk and vulnerability mapping project.
Cool.
Where we're looking at social and environmental factors that make, neighborhoods vulnerable to different kinds of risks that we may be seeing to disasters, such as floods or fires or, heat events. And that's very exciting. Well, I mean, it's not exciting that there could be disasters, but it's exciting that we have that resource that can help us prepare for those kinds of events and, to make decisions about, our capital plans and our readiness for those kinds of things. So that's probably my most exciting project in the near future.
Very cool.
Becky is so cool. She has such great projects. I love it.
And I think our GovLove listeners would relate to it. That it's not cool or exciting, but dashboards are cool and exciting. So yeah.
Exactly, right.
They are. That's exactly right.
Sandi, what about you?
I think that for me, we're trying to incorporate better equity into our community involvement work. Mm-hmm. We're trying to figure out better ways to engage folks remotely because that's pretty much all we could do for a little while. But it doesn't mean that that's all we should do forever. And so how do we now start to take that to the next level, our community involvement work to the next level? And how do we make sure that we're incorporating equity? Becky and I are both on the equity team as well. And so I'm excited about helping people understand what are we even talking about when we talk about equity? And then how do we actually make changes based on some of those principles and really tie it even tighter to community involvement?
Awesome.
That's one of my work plan items for this year.
Great. Cool. Well, our listeners will have to stay tuned to your work then. All right. So this last question, you guys know, it's usually the hardest one we ask. And, with two guests, I always say, you guys can come to a consensus or we can kind of battle it out and let the producer pick. But if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you all pick as the exit music for this episode?
This is the question I've stressed the most about, Ben.
That's fair.
Silence. Well, a song that's been stuck in. Oh yeah, a song that's been stuck in my head is "I Like Me Better" by Love. That's all I have.
Awesome. Okay.
It has a community feel to it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I guess I've been, kind of poking around with GovLove concepts, and I would say either "Crazy Little Thing About Love" or "In the End" by the Beatles.
Awesome. Ooh, and in the end,
good,
okay. Yeah.
Good choices.
Great. Lots of options to choose from. We'll let our esteemed producers pick which one takes us out. So
good luck
with that, with that. That ends our episode for today. Sandi, Becky, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me, sharing your expertise and your experience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been really fun.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. And congrats again on the What Works City certification. We'll link to the announcement and all the cool work you guys are doing as part of the show notes for this episode, so our listeners can check it out. Cool. And to our listeners, GovLove is brought to you by engaging local government leaders, and the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. You can reach us online at elgl.org/GovLove or on Twitter at the handle @GovLovePodcast. Subscribe to GovLove on your favorite podcast app. And if you're already subscribed, you should go tell a friend or colleague about this podcast. Help us spread the word that GovLove is the go-to place for local government stories. And with that, thank you for listening. This has been GovLove, a